Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to see you all again online for this first of our webinars of the new series of EMEA IMNES debate, research debate webinars, which we will try to discuss this new report that Chahir and Leila will present. And I'm very happy to have you all here, and I'll be very happy to also to listen to this presentation. So I give straight the floor to Sara Ronco, my colleague. She's a researcher at EMEA, and she will be moderating this session. So, Sara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rim, and thank you all for being here today. I am very glad to moderate this webinar. Actually, today we are trying to start a new series of webinar under EMEA in collaboration with EMNES, with the aim of discussing specific topics of research, which are topics very close to the EMNES and EMEA works, and doing it with actually researchers and members of the EMEA and EMNES networks. So today, the title of the webinar is Agriculture and Trade, Can Africa Exploit Untapped Economic Potential Through a Sustainable Food System Approach? So this is the main question which will lead the discussion today. Briefly introducing the topic, I would like to just say a few words about the fact that already before the pandemic, African agriculture and food sectors were increasingly affected by social crisis and climate change, which reduced the incomes and disrupt supply chains, among others, and extreme climate events and climate variability disrupt regular trade patterns and damage essential transportation infrastructure. In addition, with the COVID-19 pandemic and related restrictions on movement and border closures, the small-scale informal trade has been particularly affected in the continent, which is an important source of income for many households and contributed substantially to regional food security and poverty alleviation. In this sense, it is worth to mention some recent data provided by the Africa Development Bank Group, estimating that up to 38.7 million more Africans could slide into extreme poverty in 2021. And FAO, in its status of food security and nutrition in the World SOFI 2021, reveals that in 2020, about 46 million more people were affected by hunger in Africa with respect to the previous year. And this is showing significant increase in undernourishment during the pandemic, which is still holding, unfortunately. So today, we have the pleasure to hear for two co-authors of the report that will be presented about the main results. The report is the African Agricultural Trade Monitor, AATM, the annual flagship publication of the International Food Policy Research Institute and Academia 2063. Well, the 2021 AATM examines recent shocks and events, including, of course, the current pandemic and the recent implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, analyzing challenges and opportunities that they brings, and presenting also recommendation on this sense. As highlighted by the report, the well-functioning of agriculture and agri-food sectors are of a paramount importance for developing countries and for Africa, both as a source of national incomes and for ensuring food security. Every year, this report focuses on a specific region in Africa, and for this year, the focus is on Northern Africa with a particular attention on the Arab Maghreb Union. which is done in chapter 6 that will receive a particular attention during the first part of the webinar presenting the report. So without further ado, since time is also running, I'm very happy to introduce the speakers of today. Chahir Zaki, Associate Professor of Economics at the Faculty of Economics and Political Science, Cairo University, and EMNES Director for Egypt, and Leila Baghdadi, Professor of Economics at Essex, University of Tunis, where she holds the World Trade Organization Chair, part of the WTO Chair programs, and she is an executive board member of the Central Bank of Tunisia, and EMEA expert. So I give you the floor, and thank you again for being here, and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Sara. So I'm happy to present the Africa Agriculture Trade Monitor of 2021. And I'm happy that one of the co-editors, Antoine Bouet, is here with us. This AATM of this year is co-edited with Antoine Bouet and Getao Tadesse. The objective of my presentation, I will explain three main things. So what are the recent developments that are studied? What is the methodology that we adopt? And what are the main findings from each chapter, given that the structure of the AATM itself does not change from year to year, but the content itself changes. In general, as Sara highlighted in the beginning, the report is a joint production between academia and IFPRI, and most of the contributors are African, from Northern or Southern Africa. Both either working in international organizations or universities. So here you have the list of contributors, and you will see it in the chapters themselves. Generally, just to motivate the main idea of the report. So as you know, Africa is one of the continents that has an important agriculture sector with several problems, whether they are either cyclical or structural problems. Cyclical that I mean pertain to, for instance, the pandemic that we have now, the decline in oil prices, and then the increase in oil prices. So some cyclical factors that shape the competitiveness of the pandemic. And also another cyclical dimension is, for instance, all the external shocks that are temporary. But other issues have been persistent over time that are more structural, like the low investment, like the high share of informal trade that is due to corruption, to poverty, and all these structural characteristics, they also affect the competitiveness of the agricultural sector. And clearly, in addition to these sectors, we have some factors that are related to trade policy, like the existence of domestic support in developed countries, or non-tariff measures that are imposed either within Africa or outside Africa, in addition to some climate change variables such as the water stress and the conflicts. So it seems that the agriculture sector still faces several challenges at the structural level, even more than the cyclical level, and that's why most of the reforms that are needed have really to tackle such issues, which are deeper and more structural. We highlight generally in the AATM two important developments. One of them is more as an opportunity, and the other is a challenge for African countries. So the opportunity pertains to the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that started officially to be enforced and implemented on January 1st of 2021. And this shows what extent that there is an opportunity that can help African countries trade more at the African level with either very low tariffs or zero tariffs, depending on the exceptions that are present in the agreement. And the other challenge, I would say, is the effect of the pandemic, because as you know, I mean, trade, poverty, growth, everything has been affected by the pandemic. So that's why one of the chapters will show later what is the potential effect of the pandemic. And we try also to run some micro simulations in order to see what is the effect at the microeconomic level, and as I will show later. The methodology we adopt in the AATM, first, we start in general with a statistical work where we construct a proper data set, very clean, using Comtrade, but doing a lot of statistical treatments in order to guarantee that we don't have any kind of noises in the data set. So this is really one of the value added of the AATM, because this shows that at the data level, we do have a sound data that resolves all the problems that are existent in Comtrade. I will not go into the details now, but you will see in the first chapter that we explain the main modifications that are done in the data set of Comtrade in order to have a more robust and, I would say, a more proper data for policy analysis. Second, we analyze the continental and the regional trends in trade and agricultural products. And as I said, the structure of the ATM doesn't change from year to the other, but the content itself changes. And I will come to this later. And finally, given the context, we focus also on the pandemic. What does the structure of the report look like? So we have an overview that summarizes three main things: the main findings and the main research questions of each chapter, the methodology we adopt, and the main policy findings that we found in addition to the main recent developments, as I said, that are COVID and the AFCFTA. The second chapter in general analyzes the African continent in global trade in general, and shows to what extent the share of African countries increased or decreased in which sectors and so on. And this chapter, as I said, does not change, but the indices we use each year, they change in every edition of the report. The third chapter, given that the second one shows or analyzes the African participation in the global trade, the second chapter focuses more on intra-African trade. And again, the theme itself is the same, but every year we use different indices associated to different research questions in order to address, I would say, the same topic. The fourth chapter is generally dedicated to the analysis of value chains. So last year, for instance, we examined sugar, oil, I mean, in terms of their value chain, and by value chain, I mean to what extent African countries, they produce and export unprocessed versus semi-processed versus processed products, in order to see also what are the trade policy impediments that hinder this upgrade in the value added. And this year we focus on some very complicated chains, which are livestock, meat, poultry, and dairy products, and I will come to this later. The fifth chapter in general is a topical chapter, meaning that we choose a hot topic that is debatable for the time being and that is worth investigating. So this year we address the issue of the COVID through a CGE model and a micro simulation, as I said in the beginning. And this topical chapter also changes from a year to the other. So last year, what was it, Antoine? I forgot the topical chapter.
Informal cross-border trade.
Yes, exactly. It was on informal cross-border trade, which is an important issue in Africa. And the last chapter generally analyzes one of the regional economic communities that we have in Africa. So a couple of years ago, we examined COMESA. Last year, we analyzed SADC. This year, we're analyzing the Arab Maghreb Union in order to see whether these countries are under trading, over trading, what hinders that trade in terms of tariff and non-tariff measures, and so on. So that's the structure of the report. Sara, do I still have 5 minutes? Or
yes.
Okay, perfect. So I will just give 1 minute per each chapter. I will not go through chapter 1 because it's the overview. I'll just give the main message of each chapter, and then I will leave Laila, who will present the details of chapter 6. Given the interest of this region for us. So in chapter 2, as I said, we analyze global trade of Africa, and the main value added of this chapter is that we try to focus on some products and see whether African countries, they are diversified or not, so diversified or non-diversified or concentrated in terms of their exports, and what they produce, whether they produce standard products or what we call produce exclusive products, meaning that these products that that are not, I mean, at the product level that diversified, if we can say. So the main finding is definitely, so as you can see here in the upper right-hand side of the slide, we have 4 groups depending on these 2 criteria, and we found that most of the African countries, they belong to non-diversified countries and producing exclusive product as it's shown in Group A. The only exceptions are in general South Africa and Egypt that have relatively improved their performance. And we finally observe also the factor content of the products, whether in terms of calories and whether in terms of water stress. Okay, I mean the water content in exports and imports. And one of the important findings is that most of the African countries now, they are net importer rather than net exporters, while they were before net exporters. The third chapter focuses on, as I said, focuses on the intra-African trade, and we choose 10 products that are important from a food security perspective. So 4 cereal products: rice, maize, wheat, and beans, vegetables, potatoes, onions, and tomatoes, and fruits, which are bananas, citrus fruits, apples, and plantains. So those are the products that we focus on in this chapter, and the value added of this chapter is that we use a network analysis in order to see to what extent to what extent trade and agriculture within Africa is regionalized or not. And one of the findings is that over time, the generalization has increased, which shows that African countries are increasing their trade within Africa. And this is good news, because we used to say that intra-African trade is not very high. And the number of trade links in addition to that increased over time. So we have more country pairs that are trading between themselves. Chapter 4, this is just an example for you to have an idea about the main nucleus countries that trade more compared to other for each product. So for instance, this is the one of rice. Chapter 4 analyzes the value chains, as I said, and it was very difficult to study this value chain because first, it's difficult to have this clear-cut classification of processed, semi-processed, and unprocessed, because we have live animals, for instance. So the counterpart of unprocessed products is live animals, for instance. Semi-processed is meat that is cut, but meat that is processed will be fully processed. So that's the main thing that we're analyzing in this chapter for those 3 value chains: meat and animals, dairy products, and poultry. 2 important findings is that first, informal trade in these products is very important, and that's why if we limit the analysis to formal trade, it can be misleading somehow, because several products are still traded informally, and that's why it's highly recommended to have more efforts and more initiatives to calculate informal trade. And second is that African countries, they still face several impediments, despite the fact that they have a fully liberalized regime, either through the Everything But Arms in Europe or the AGOA initiative in the US. But despite this, African countries, they cannot satisfy the demand because of other problems, especially related to non-tariff measures, and especially, as you know, technical barriers to trade, which are mainly sanitary and phytosanitary measures and technical barriers to trade. So that's why the 2 important policy messages: first, it's very important to work more on collecting informal data to have a real picture of what we have, and second is investing more in complying in the compliance of African countries to NTNs. Chapter 5, as I said, it's a topical chapter that uses a CGE model, and we try to see how the COVID shock affected African countries. And the main finding is that we found that the effect is smaller than initially expected, actually. And we had some heterogeneity across countries. For instance, one of the countries, such as Egypt, was the only one that had a positive GDP growth, 2 other countries, such as Cameroon, Ghana, and Nigeria, they had a negative GDP growth. And Egypt was the only one that had a positive GDP growth. 2 other countries, such as Egypt, was the only one that had a positive GDP growth. And among African countries. And then we tried to see the microeconomic effect of this shock in order to see what is the share of people who fall under poverty, whether the policy space that we have allows to curb the negative effects of the pandemic. And we did this for 3 countries, Ghana, Uganda, and Senegal. And as you can see, the poverty incidence increased significantly in these countries, especially in Ghana from 20 to 34%, in Senegal from 39 to 72%, and in Uganda from 19 to 27%. Finally, and I will stop here, we focused, as I said, on the regional economic community. This year, we focused on the Arab Maghreb Union that includes 4 countries, Algeria, Libya, Mauritania, Morocco, and Tunisia. And we focus on 2 main things that Laila will present with more details. What are the products? Sorry, what are the trade flows that are or the products that are traded within the countries of the Arab Maghreb Union, and what are the trade policies at the intra-regional level and the extra-regional level that hinder trade performance. So with that, I will stop here and I will give the floor to Laila, who will give you more details on the Arab Maghreb Union, given its interest for both, the Euro-Mediterranean Economists Association and EMNES, given the relationship with Europe. Thank you, and thank you, Sara, for the moderation.
Thank you, Chahir. Okay, then, thank you first for the invitation. I'm very pleased to present during this first webinar of the EMEA EMNES network. As Chahir said, then this chapter, it is actually I present chapter 6 of the AATM report. It is co-authored with Zaki, a colleague at University of Tunis, and Chahir Zaki, colleague from Cairo University. And it's about the Arab Maghreb Union, as Chahir said, and we are trying to, the name we gave it to Chahir is regionalization without integration, and I will tell you why. Then we're speaking about a large area, strategically located with the dynamic at the south of its borders, Africa south of the Sahara, and in the north, very advanced countries, which is European. We're speaking about European countries. They are very similar in terms of cultural heritage, in terms of norms, in terms of history, but still there are a lot of disparity. They are heterogeneous in terms of economic and political structures and resources. They do face some common threats, and we'll tell you a bit about that. This union was established in 1989 with the vision to be more integrated. There were a lot of good intention at the beginning, and they envisioned to do this in 3 steps. First, to dismantle tariffs and non-tariff barriers, then a customs union with the common external tariffs to the world, and then free movement of factors of production. It didn't work as they envisioned it, and I will tell you the reasons. But first, I will give you an outlook, a snapshot of actually the trade looks like, especially for agricultural products. Then this is a first fact about the annual trade. Then in AMU, the contribution of agriculture to GDP is actually lower than the contribution of other sectors to GDP. We consider the period from 2003 to 2019. Generally, it is lower than industry and services, but as I said, it's quite heterogeneous. Then you can see that for Mauritania, the contribution of agriculture to GDP is about 90.1%, whereas the contribution of industry in Mauritania is around 41.4%. And you can see that for Libya, the agricultural contribution to GDP is only 2.7%, whereas the contribution of industry is around 79%. The other countries range between these two extremes. Then here is an example of heterogeneity between countries when we talk about the contribution of GDP. Second fact, countries trade more with Europe than with African countries or MMO. And you can see, and they trade more in non-agricultural products actually. Then you can see for the first graph, for agricultural product, the exports from MMO to Europe are quite higher than those to other MMO countries or to Africa. Then exports to MMO or Africa, they are not superior to $1 billion, whereas the other for Europe is around, in 2019, are around more than $4 billion. For non-agricultural products, figures are quite are sensibly different and higher. Then you can see then for in 2018, the exports to Europe in non-agricultural products around $75 billion, whereas for exports to MMO or to Africa is still low, 1.34% in 2018 for when we are talking about exports to Europe. Why the MMO didn't achieve its objective? We listed at least 5. There are several reasons. What we concentrated on reasons lying in economic background. Then first, MMO countries actually signed various trade agreements, bilateral, regional, apart from some of them signed with the WTO, the multilateral, some others are outside multilateral agreements. Then all of this made the kind of spaghetti ball agreements that we were in presence of more trade diversion than trade creation within the region. Second, tariffs are still high in the agricultural sector. Even if they are more objective at the beginning, one of the first steps was really to lower and even to totally get rid of tariffs. They are still there and they are quite higher, and they are higher than the non-agricultural sector. For instance, agricultural imports within the MMO face a tariff of 1.2% in Nigeria, and it goes to 16.2% in Mauritania. Third fact, even if we saw some reduction, let's say, in tariffs, we saw the opposite trend in non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers are still existing, and they are even quite higher than the average world level, especially in imports. Then we can see that the prevalence score for AATMs in most countries are higher than exports, and they are more or less like the world average. It means that they are quite high actually. And for instance, we have Algeria with a high prevalence score. In general, we saw that there is an increase, or we have several non-tariff barriers in technical barriers, and after that, sanitary and sanitary barriers. Fourth reasons, to do business, to trade, you need to have good connectivity. You need to have good ports. You need to have strong infrastructure. You need to have direct maritime lines and speed one, rapid ways to send your products. And this is really, this is like in the countries. We saw that actually, and we show the chapter that MMOs, unfortunately, they have the lowest connectivity in the world in MMO countries, along with Africa, south of the Sahara. They have the highest cost to trade of the world. followed by Africa south of the Sahara. They have poor quality of ports and railroads. This being said, there is a champion in the region, which is Morocco. During the last 10 years, we saw a strong increase of its infrastructure, connectivity, and it's now quite similar even to European countries. And it is possible to improve quite quickly. Fifth reason, domestic institution, regulatory standards are really important for trade. This was proven in the literature, and we can see also quite strong correlation between these institutions and doing business and doing trade, actually. Then we have seen, looking to the indicators, several indexes, that corruption is higher in EMU than other countries. And for instance, respect of property laws is lower than the US, European Union, MENA region, other countries in the MENA region, except apart from them, but higher than the respect of property law rights, higher than Africa south of Sahara, for instance. There is still higher level of market dominance in countries. For instance, it is higher than MENA, and there is still a lack of strong practices to lower anti-monopoly practices in countries. Then all these reasons might explain, in our, at least we argue that these are real barriers to integration in countries. And I will conclude by 3 recommendations from our chapter. Then first, there is a need for common vision for the agri-food sectors to drive integration. This will lower the common risks of water scarcity and climate change. It will also ensure food security, because this country, they are more or less food secure, but still there is a lot of vulnerabilities in this because of this common threat of water scarcity and climate change. Then having or envisioning a common vision for the agri-food sector will help them to work toward alleviating these vulnerabilities. We believe that till now the approach of the integration was vertical, and with the political leaders leading this thing, maybe an approach through a platform, more horizontal, with private and public stakeholders working on various horizontal policies to go through more integration will be more effective. Second, trade policy alone is not enough to have more integration. It's important to have a comprehensive, cohesive regional integration which links trade policy to agricultural, industrial, and competition policies. As we have seen that these policies really matter and could really become strong barriers to trade. Third, without good infrastructure, without connectivity, without transport, good infrastructures of transport, we cannot really trade. And this is really important. It is important for EMU countries to improve infrastructure and connectivity within, because they do have better connectivity to other regions in the world, but within EMU, it really have one of the lowest score. Thank you. I will leave you up, Sara. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Leila, for the comprehensive presentation, and Chahir. Of course, it's a long report with a lot of funding consideration, policy recommendation. So I don't see any question in the chat, but I know that Rim maybe has one before going to presenting the discussants. Rim, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
First, thank you, Chahir and Leila, for presenting, and also Antoine for being with us. for this very important topic, which is agriculture, future of agriculture policy in Africa. So, I mean, I have more questions, but my early questions before listening to Chahir and Leila was mainly on the role of China in the agriculture sector in Africa. It has been quite growing over the years. I don't know if you had the opportunity to see any or to collect any data on their involvement. Now, my second question, which I cannot hold myself not to ask, I mean, we're talking about the agriculture sector, where is a sector that consumes a lot of water. Nowadays, the region is under climate change, I would say, attack in a certain manner, and there are droughts, there are other issues related to climate change. So how do you deal with this in reality? Are we still going to say, let's export more agricultural products, and then you're mentioning an integrated approach, which is industrial competition, trade, but what about environmental policy? I think this is quite an important aspect which you need to think of. It means that we need to also integrate environmental policies and ensure that the export does not also undermine the capacity or the resources, the water resources of the countries. You know, we have done some research before, actually many years ago, to show that it doesn't make sense, for example, some countries to export certain products or certain resources because of the high use of water. Also, you mentioned the connectivity between the different countries in the Maghreb Union. I think this is important, and it has been quite of an obstacle, but we see nowadays all the interactions, political interactions between the countries, Libya, Algeria, and Morocco. It's much more a political issue, and this is going to be exacerbated in the future. So how do you see all of this? And then, of course, mentioned by Sara at the beginning, food security and social inclusion. I think these are very important matters that have to be really seriously looked at nowadays, because obviously agriculture and food policy, it's key, especially when we see that in the during the COVID, inequality has increased, poverty has increased. So most probably the governments are facing to go back to the subsidies. So what is your view on the subsidies, food subsidies? Thank you. I'm sorry, because I have more questions, but I'll stop here. So to leave the discussion for there. Thank you.
Yes, maybe since time is running, maybe we can first listen to the discussant and then go to answering question, and then starting from those questions which are quite broad. And so I present the discussant, which are Giorgio Giovannetti, Vice President for International Relations and Professor of Economics at the University of Florence, and EMNES Associate Members, and Cynthia Chahir, Project Coordinator and Senior Researcher at EMEA. Please, Giorgio, the floor is yours. Sorry for the delay.
Thanks, Sara. Thanks to everyone, and thanks for the invitation of, discussing this report. I think this is a very interesting and timely report, and I think the presentation of Chahir and Leila were very good, and Reem already suggested the topic for next year, because so I think I also agree with her that the linking the environmental policy to the agricultural policy and trade policy is really crucial at the moment. And I will say a couple of words on that at the end. I was thinking of concentrating on two issues. One is the intra-Africa agricultural trade, and I like the presentation with the network analysis. I think that is very intuitive and very nice, and gives you immediately the importance of different countries and different goods. Because you see the strength of the links and things like that. And then the second issue I want to mention is the global value chain. Chahir mentioned as example, the livestock, the meat, the poultry, the dairy product, and things like that. Basically, what I'm going to say is the relation between the reaction of global value chain to the pandemic and their resilience. So the idea is global value chain, belonging to global value chain, enhance the resilience, and therefore could be actually very good for some of these countries. Now, on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, I think that the main message is basically that the enlarged regional market offer farmers, firms, supply and value chain linkages into other markets, which can be inside or outside the region or the strict region. And another thing that they offer is stronger collective bargaining power. And I think these are important elements that we should account for. Of course, the other vital element for regional cooperation is the availability and supply of public goods. And both Chahir and Leila mentioned water, and also, so Chahir mentioned it, Leila put it even in the recommendation, and Reem also mentioned it, and also speaking about the Chinese basically using the land and buying water-intensive products, or suggesting that the Chinese were getting water-intensive products. The COVID pandemic, I think, underscored really strongly the benefits of an integrated market, because a common response to a threat, in this case was the pandemic, but Reem mentioned another one, which was climate change connected to water. Basically, if you can give a common answer to this threat, you're going to be better off. And the integrated market is a way to do that. Now, Africa, I mean, different type of countries in Africa, because then the policy should be country specific. But every country in Africa has been so far missing out most of the benefits of integrated markets. And at this point, failing to harness the opportunity that arise as a result. They're still too fragmented. Both Chahir and Leila mentioned that. And they lack the scale to compete in an increasingly globalized world. Then the solution, I think, is the global value chain. And this comes out in the report. Why is that? Well, Chahir mentioned, for instance, the fact that you have production, export of an export of unprocessed versus semi-processed versus processed goods, and this gives you a measure of the agricultural value chain. And he mentioned the example, which are detailed in the report, of livestock, meat, poultry, dairy products, and so on and so forth. What I maintain is that, is also on the basis of undergoing research, is that global value chain help enhancing the resilience of the country. So even if these countries are fragmented, even if they are still not joining the benefits of an integrated regional market, it's very, very important to join, to be in a global value chain and in an agricultural global value chain, which are, I think, the new topic of research. The policy debate, however, has been very much on the dismantling of global value chain due to the COVID, the idea of reshoring and issues like that. I think that to break existing contract can be very costly. Of course, here there are very large differences for different type of products. Breaking the contract with some product can be much, much more costly than for other products. And but I think that firms, for as much as we can tell, for instance, on ongoing research done with the World Bank Enterprise Survey data, do not show much intention to reshore. The COVID surveys of the World Bank Enterprise surveys, I think, are very clear on that. There are very clear questions. There are several waves of surveys, and it's fairly interesting what they get. So basically, these were the things I wanted to say. Of course, I think it's very important to integrate the environmental policy, as Reem was suggesting. And I think here, however, rather than using tariffs or non-tariff barriers in order to stop agricultural products, I will concentrate on something different, which is the research on energy-saving transport modalities. For instance, the new container, the sailing container, will help a lot. So I will put more emphasis on the energy-saving transportation mode than on stopping the export of agricultural product. Thanks. Basically, I think that's more or less what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Georgia. And time is running, so I will give the floor immediately to Cynthia. Please, if you want to provide your comments, then we open a little bit of discussion. Thank you.
Sara, thank you for all. It's very interesting to be here and comment with you the report. So first of all, to congratulate Chahir, Antoine and Leila that are here, because it's a very interesting way to understanding how it is the behavior in these last years about the trade, and especially I must confess the detail of the data. It's very good. So I wanted to highlight this, and actually Chahir commented, and it's a good advance on identifying which are those indicators to understand in all the dimension of the African countries. So in my case, so I have, I must say my background, it's more from a urban ecology perspective and from the urban planning management. So I would like to highlight something that, of course, climate change is a spine aspect that we must consider, and the environmental incidents and how to internalize the externalities on economic value. So I will suggest also, and I found it really interesting, and I wanted to highlight that you comment the trade in calories, because this is something important to incorporate new units of energy, as Georgia was saying, but also in terms of the calories that we need. Because of course, most of the countries, as you well pointed, they're under the minimal requirements of calories consumption per person. So in terms of food security, it will be good to internalize and link into a healthy diet. And this is very related to nutrition and healthy conditions related to agriculture. So I think it's a very important unit to continue working on that. Not only because it gives us the commodities on the balance of the trade, but also to the minimum requirements for the population. So each country should achieve at least the minimum kilocalories per person, and then to identify with what they can export. And this is also related for the resources that you use to achieve these main kilocalories per person. And that will be precisely the use of water and energy. And this is something that it is getting more and more relevant, and it's true. It's a link between water, food, and agriculture. Why? Because there are 100 and a lot of solutions to use the marginal water. What does that mean? If we are going to have extreme weather conditions, so we must take the opportunity to use the rain water, you know. So not only to think about the drinkable water, but to reduce as much as possible these for the agricultural use. So what happens on using the gray and the rainwater? So this is very important to establish and to link precisely on the urban and the territorial planning. And again, another thing that you mentioned, I think it's very, very important in the micro scale, is the ownership of land use. I have heard that it's a very complicated, different way of the management of land use. And I think that, and you can see different examples in Latin America, for example, how they manage to manage a different way of land use ownership. So that local farmers can be able to enable their own business in a very slow scale. So probably could be a way to tackle also the informality, but thinking also in the smaller scale. That's what I just wanted to highlight, because it's relevant, the data collection, of course, but if we manage to also have the detail in a local level, we can understand what is happening, and in the cultural point of view, what is the relation and between the trade on these intra-Africa countries. So just wanted to highlight these two things about the link also, of course, with environmental, but with nutrition, and to achieve a minimal, as the FAO, it's highlighting 2,100 kilocalories per person. We know that there, and you mentioned on the report, there are just a very few that they manage to have a positive balance. There's still countries that they don't even achieve this minimum. So I think it's an important aspect to stress and of course dealing with the challenges of heating stress, the impact on farming and animals, poultry, that you already mentioned on the report. So that's from my side, and congratulations once again.
Thank you, Cynthia, for these thoughts, and I would like to now give the floor to Chahir and Leila, because I've seen also hand raised before, to react to all these topics that has been raised. So please.
I think Leila, would you like to start?
Well, I mean, if I can answer.
Okay, now I can hear you. Sorry.
If I can answer first, thank you all for your comments. Very insightful, actually. To be honest, I didn't thought about all the aspects you raised, but they are really they are relevant, very relevant. I'm not an expert on food security or climate change, but I will tell you what we did in the report in the chapter of IMO. Then we find that according to the EU Global Food Security Index, these countries are classified as relatively food secure, but because of water stress, the IMO perform relatively poorly in terms of food availability and resilience. Then I'll tell you a little bit what I know also for my country, Tunisia, with the COVID-19. I know that there is a food, I mean, the inflation in terms of food increased between 2000 today, I mean, this month, compared to the same month in 2021 by 22%. It's a huge. And we observed relatively the same thing from 2019 to 2021. And this is following the COVID-19. Then clearly here we have huge challenges for countries like Tunisia, not only where there is a tax premium on, especially on the poor categories of the society. And when you are in the societies facing climate change, food security issues, and water stress, you can imagine what will happen, how this will impact not only the security of the country, but also in terms of eventually social unrest and things like that, if we don't integrate that, not only in terms of trade policy, but also in terms of financing and insurance. One of the things I saw, and I found it very interesting, and something that I should really take it more seriously and look through it, is the African Risk Capacity Initiative, which gives, which think about innovative finance to ensure, you know, the agricultural sectors and how it could be taken into account, even when we are talking, when, you know, even for central banking, for instance, or monetary policy, it should be also taken into account. I will not go a lot through this because it's not really my area in agriculture, but just to say that, I mean, I agree that this is really something important. This is something to take a look at. And I will also add, for countries like Tunisia, water is subsidized. Then most likely we are actually taking credit or taking water from the next generation. Then this problem will only increase in the next years. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. Maybe Chahir, you want to add
Yes,
something?
thank you, Sara. Perhaps before I mean, I have some answers, but Antoine, would you like to have to answer any of these questions before myself?
Or maybe after you.
Okay, okay. I'll be very brief. So I just have two main, answers for the one question of Georgia and the other of Cynthia, which is also one of the questions of Reem. So I totally agree on the importance of linking environmental variables with agricultural variables, because there are, I mean, some exogenous factors like the endowments, for instance, in terms of water, that will definitely shape the comparative advantage of these countries. But one of the things that we propose in chapter 6 is actually this hydroponic production that in general relies much less on water than traditional agriculture. If I'm not mistaken, the literature, they have shown that it reduces around 90% of the water usage. And this definitely, the challenge will be the fixed cost of investment in order to adopt such a technology, but at the same time, it can be used in order to curb this negative effect of water stress, especially if we are to promote agriculture products in Africa. On global value chains, I totally agree with you, Georgia, on the importance of that, because actually most of the products are exported unprocessed or raw material, and the value added is low. Consequently, the value of exports itself is low, and this is generally associated to the tariff escalation that we observe in some countries, given the fact that unprocessed products, they have a lower protection compared to processed products. So that's why part of the story, in order to promote such value chains, will be on the one hand, increasing investment in agriculture in these countries, especially foreign investment, and on the other, resolving this problem of tariff escalation that still can affect the different products and that we find in some countries. And just to partially answer, also talking about that, the question of REAM, in the chapter in chapter 4 and in chapter 6, as far as I remember, we also analyze the trade policies that are imposed by the different or the main agricultural producers, which are India, China, and Brazil. Some of the barriers, I mean, if I summarize everything, so first, most of the domestic support that is provided in these countries is through the green box, which is allowed. The amount of domestic support that exceeds the green box is very, in general, low, and that's why indirectly such I mean domestic support through the green box indirectly affects the competitiveness of these countries. And second, non-tariff measures, and especially SPS, which will require a huge investment in terms of compliance and standardization. And the question will be here, if we improve the quality of products, or even if we're going to have some kind of mutual recognition, there is a cost, and this cost definitely is more fixed rather than variable. So I will stop here, and perhaps Antoine would like to add something.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking to make the same point as you. So concerning the role of NTMs and capital requirements and investment and so on. I would like to insist on data, because data is really a big issue concerning trade in Africa. I think that we have not a good understanding of what's happening on the ground. So for example, with the private sector in West Africa, we are working on improving trade data in West Africa between Western African countries. And it looks like, concerning 100 agricultural products, it looks like trade data, when they are not treated statistically, they miss around 95% of trade between Western African countries. So I really think that today we have a big mistreatment and misunderstanding of what's happening on the ground. So it's a big problem, and this is something that international institutions have to address in the next years, very soon. And also, I would like to say that level of intra-African trade maybe is not very low, because in fact we miss most of the trade happening between African states because of informal trade. And China, so We have shown in past reports that the level of trade of African states with BRICS, Brazil, India and China in particular is increasing a lot at the detrimental of trade with Europe. So I think the role of China is increasing concerning trade in agriculture, and of course concerning land, there is also something special happening here. So thank you very much, and I would like to thank the organizer of this session because it was very interesting. Thank you very much for your very relevant questions.
Thank you, Antoine, for your.
Can I add that the report is freely accessible on the IFPRI website?
Yes. Yes, I think the link was also shared in the email inviting people to the webinar, but good to remember. And so many thanks. I will now ask the audience if there are other key questions for the speakers or for the discussant, because I don't see anything in the chat. Meanwhile, I would like to ask me too something, because I went through the report, and again, congratulations again because it's very comprehensive and is tackling many things, and it was inspiring for me also the issue raised by Cynthia and Georgia. I would say that we are in a transition period, talking about the economy overall, but particularly when talking about trade, which has been a key tool for the economic globalization until now. And now, since the economic globalization is changing radically, not only because of the pandemic, but surely the pandemic accelerated many transformations that were already involved before. And about the transformation, I wanted to ask whether in the report you analyze at some point the role of digitalization in trade, particularly when it comes to agriculture trade, and whether new technology and new tool, I'm thinking about global blockchain, for example, could help also in tackling the issue of getting more data, particularly when it comes to informal trade, which is playing a key role in agriculture sector in Africa. So maybe, I don't know who wants to take this question. Maybe Chahir?
Yes, so would you like, I mean, I think it's mainly related to, I would say, two main things. So first, the issue of when it comes to global value chains and regional value chains, and we have been working with that with Georgia, Enrico, and Dream on that. Actually, a top priority issue would be the domestic value chains, actually, because domestic value chains, they mainly depend on domestic institutions, and the worse domestic institutions, the less likely you're going to have domestic value chains, and the less this will help promote global value chains. And this especially applies to the agriculture sector, because agricultural products are perishable, and I mean, they are very sensitive to the quality of institutions or the quality of all the logistics, as it was highlighted by Laila, especially in the AMU, for instance. So I think this is an important thing for the competitiveness of agricultural products through regional and global value chains, especially addressing domestic factors, even much more than for I would say non-tariff measures and tariffs, because domestic institutions, they depend chiefly on the exporter, not necessarily on the importer, but non-tariff measures and tariffs will depend on the negotiation between both. So that's one. And the other thing, I would like also to second the point, that was raised by Antoine on the importance of data, because we'll not really be able to measure, for instance, we highlighted already the issue of informal trade, but trade in intermediate inputs in agriculture, for instance. And here, the quality of data is not really helpful. So I think those are the two issues that I have in mind related to that. And I don't know if Laila, Reem, or anyone would like to add to that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sara, for your comments, especially concerning blockchain. It's I personally am highly interested by that, and I observe actually in the Maghreb in general, for the EMU, there is an absence of debates concerning this question. Maybe where some experience. It is, of course, it is absolutely important to go further into understanding blockchain digitalization, and especially if you are taking from global value chain or regional value chain, it's really important, and it will open up quite strong potential for firms, especially small and medium firms. However, what we have seen, first, some firms are doing it individually, using their own resources. It's not possible for all firms to do that. There is not really assistance. And second, this is an area where you need to have strong vision and understanding of what it means. And there is several overlapping. Then again, here you don't have, you need to think about it as a comprehensive package. And maybe we were not speaking about that, but it's really important, especially for agricultural product. And this is a space where really and we need to think about it a lot. And I observe it personally. We are still far from it, but doesn't mean will not find a place there. But clearly, we need to do that. In terms of blockchain, at least from individual experience, it was quite successful. There is an experience for olive oil for Tunisia, for instance, and it went well for them, and it opened it for this firm, especially it points big potential, lot of success. Hopefully, we'll work more on that in the future.
Thank you very much. So I don't know if there are any other questions.
Yes, I have one comment on this, Sara. I think your point on digitalization is very important, and also we see as one of the responses of the pandemic was the increasing role of platforms and e-commerce also on agriculture products. I think this is a topic that should be part of the research, trying to collect data. I think the data that you guys collected in the report is very comprehensive, and I believe that more data on environmental issues also linked to agriculture sector and trade policy should be part of this collection, but also the role of platforms, digital platforms, e-commerce, and all of this. I think this is important to better understand the impact of the digitalization into the overall sector. But thank you very much. Really, again, it was a very interesting report. Congratulations once again. And back to Sara.
Yes, so I don't know if there are other questions. I don't see.
Sara, I raise my hands just to say two things. That what Reem was saying about digitalization, for instance, the World Bank Enterprise Survey have exactly some questions on the digitalization and whether firms. Now, I don't know what's the sample of agricultural firms, because of course that's a problem. So we have more data for manufacturing than we have certainly for agriculture. And there is all the issue of informality that was mentioned before. which obviously bound one, which obviously it's a very important one. But if we can where to find answers to the question of digitalization, I think that will be really, really relevant. And otherwise, this is a data that we would like to get. The other thing is because we spoke about the blockchain, you mentioned them, Leila answer saying it's very interesting. I think here the issue, the most important issue on the blockchain is the issue of traceability, the fact that the goods can be traced. And I think that is another aspect that maybe we want to highlight when we discuss these issues. This is particularly important to come out of the informality also. So I think that could be also used in a report like this.
Thank you. Thank you, Georgia. Yes, I was exactly thinking about that because I mean, one of the main good things mentioned when you see reports about this blockchain and things like that is exactly transparency, traceability, improving the availability of the data, and also, of course, reducing corruption and all the things that are related to the fact that many times in informality there are a lot of problems related to corruption and asymmetry in information. So I don't know, I don't see any other hand raised, and we are a little bit out of time, so I will close this session. Again, many thanks to all of you for all your contribution, and once again for presenting this outstanding report. Thank you for all the EMEA team for organizing this, and we are hoping to have soon another session presenting another report and have another such interesting discussion. And we will invite you for sure, hoping that you can be there also. So thank you again all for your time and for being here, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sara.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.